Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Maximizing Water Efficiency for Healthier Landscapes. I'm Kim Lux, Senior Editor with Lawn and Landscape. Now, before I introduce today's speakers, I just want to review a few housekeeping notes. This webinar is being recorded, so anyone who has registered ahead of time will receive an emailed link to the recording within the next few days. Additionally, please share any questions you may have in the Q&A box below. We'll try to save some time at the end of the hour to answer them. Speaking today, we have Pat Johnston, an irrigation product manager with Horizon Distributors, and Nick DiLorenzo, a landscape product manager with Horizon. Pat is also the head of Horizon's technical services team. He has over 20 years experience in the irrigation industry and holds both CID and CLIA accreditations. Nick has nearly 35 years of experience in the industry, focusing on the importance of soil health and sustainability. He regularly conducts classes on pesticide safety and application across the U.S. Pat and Nick, please take it away.
Hey, good morning, everybody. For some of you, this presentation is part of your everyday. You're growing, watering, mowing, trimming, cleaning, fixing, programming. Landscape care requires a multifaceted understanding of all of its elements, right? So today, Nick and I want to focus on what we think could be the most important two, right? Soil and irrigation. Sometimes it's way overlooked. Soil is way overlooked and perhaps not completely understood portion, right, of water efficiency. As Kim, we appreciate her introduction. My name's Pat Johnston. I am the irrigation product manager and technical services manager for Horizon.
I'm Nick DiLorenzo, Landscape Product Manager for Horizon, and Pat and I want to welcome you guys to Horizon University #2. And really what we're hoping to do today is to give you guys some ideas so that you guys can go back to your properties to where you have an understanding of how and why we need to maximize any water efficiencies. So I want to thank Kim for giving us the introduction. That had to have been AI because I couldn't write anything that good about myself or anything like that. So I want to thank you for that. As we go forward, though, today's agenda starts with why water efficiency matters. And then we'll cover, plant fundamentals and soil fundamentals, and then irrigation efficiency, and then finally how everything ties together into an integrated strategy that you can apply in your real landscapes.
So maximum water efficiency is achieved by understanding both soil and then aligning irrigation strategies around it. Okay. Many of the concepts we'll cover may already be familiar to you, right? In one way or another. But the goal is to connect them just like the landscape is connected. And when we're looking at the landscape, it deals with all of it, right? And we want to apply or give you ways to create a repeatable approach that saves water while improving landscape health. Next slide.
So the why do we have to look at ways to maximize water efficiency? Well, the first and really only reason why is because we are a responsible industry. Being in an industry that relies on water use, it is our responsibility to maximize the ability to utilize less and educate our customers that less is more. When we make the decision to use it on our landscapes, it's our job to make sure that it stays on the landscapes. As populations continue to increase, it creates a strain on the water use systems, and it becomes a challenge. And our governing bodies are always looking at ways to reduce the use, targeting our industry, and we don't want to do that. So it's our responsibility as an industry to ensure that the resources we use responsibly, and we use with the backing of science-based approaches that we can educate our customers, our legislators, that they know that we know what we are doing. Next slide. So before talking about products or systems or anything like that, it's important to establish the foundational principles of water efficiency. Water efficiency is not a single tool. It is a system built on our behaviors and our habits. And it's also on the soils that we have either inherited or created. And it's aligned with plant health and irrigation design all working together. This section is going to focus on how water moves into the soil, what wetting agents do and how they work, and why we should be using them in our everyday lives on the landscape. So I want to introduce you guys to my sponge, and his name is Bob. And I typically use Bob all the time when I'm talking about soil and waters. And the reason why is because Bob absorbs things. So the way that water moves in the soil is water will enter at the surface, or what we call the wetting front. From the start, there's already challenges that reduce the ability of water moving in, and that's called adhesion. So once the water applied gets heavy enough to start moving in and reduces the adhesive forces, then you'll start to see water infiltrate and then percolate down into the soil. Field capacity is a very important word. Field capacity is when, after an irrigation or a watering event, that this whole column of water is completely saturated. That's where we should be thinking about watering all the time. But as you'll see in the next couple of slides, there's a certain thing or physical thing that determines whether we could do that or not. Not yet. Water holding capacity is after this column of water dries down, right? So 24 hours after field capacity, you have left water holding capacity. Half of that is what we call plant available water. So in essence, after we're programming, we're allowing our landscape to water, it's taking in the water, but in reality, the plants don't even get half of the water that we are applying over a period of time. That's why we got to get a better understanding of why water efficiency means to us and how do we improve that. Next slide.
And I think, Nick, that's, it's arguable. The EPA has thrown out numbers like 50% of the water that is used in landscape. Yeah, it goes to waste, right? So, but the thing of it is, you're going to take us through the challenges on soil. I don't know where their math comes from exactly. Right. I would really love to know.
Anyway. Absolutely. Well, yeah, as we know.
Yes.
So here on this slide, you guys see my buddy Bob the Sponge. And Bob the Sponge is great. Bob is 50% solid and 50% pore space. And, out of that pore space, 25 typically occupies oxygen and the other 25% typically occupies water. And when you get the field capacity, then the whole sponge fills up with water and then it dries down and the air comes back in. The efficient landscape water management starts with understanding your soils, doing soil testing, and also now do irrigation suitability testing. You need to understand your soil and you need to understand the water quality that you're using. This knowledge is going to help you with a thorough understanding of how water on your site moves through your soil. And this greatly affects the relationship of plant health and irrigation requirements. So when we do soil testing, typically you're looking at the chemical composition, but the labs that we use, you also get the biological assessment and also the physical assessment, which is probably one of the most important things you should be looking at in your everyday lives on your properties. You should be doing soil testing every year, and especially if you're taking on a new property, you should be soil testing and also water testing that property. Soil texture is basically the amount of sand, silt, and clay that is found in your soil, and it always dictates infiltration rates. Sandy soils always give away water quicker than clay soils, and clay soils have the ability to compact, which then reduces its ability to infiltrate and percolate. So when we're looking at soil texture, it is probably in the maintenance category the most influencing factor that we do in terms of how we water, how we manage that site, how we fertilize that site is all based on, because everything we do is based on water use, how the water moves through that soil. Let's talk about water quality liabilities a little bit. Water quality liabilities in our water can also impede water movement and infiltration in our soils. Excess calcium, excess magnesium that's insoluble, which is carbonates, excess sodium will create chemical compaction on the surface of the soil, especially in tighter clay soils, which then that irrigation water tends to pool and then eventually run off.
So there's
Compaction is a condition of soil dysfunction. So just an example of water is not always as good as you think it is. Back in like 2023, the city of Denver, where I live, sent a notification out to everybody in the city saying that they need to raise the pH in their water to reduce the corrosion in the piping. By raising the pH, it's going to reduce them having to replace piping and then the corrosion. So they factored in that they were going to go from a 7.5 to a 9.2, hovering right around at 8.8. Well, when you look at that, that's great. You can still drink that, but when you apply it to your landscape, now what are you going to do? Because your plant material does not like the extra sodium or the liabilities they're putting in their water to make their water so that they're not having to replace any of that piping. So water quality is a significant challenge, especially along the south and into the west. Anywhere that you are not getting precipitation, that it is going to fill your aquifers, that is going to give you cleaner water. With that said, we got to talk a little bit about hydrophobic soil or water repellency. Hydrophobic soil is frequently triggered by prolonged heat and drought stress, and the water is repelled at the surface. And basically, that is in part due to those adhesive forces that I talked about earlier. Pat, do you know a way to reduce the adhesive forces in a soil?
I think you're going to tell us.
Yeah, I'm going to suggest that we use wetting agents and or even just use a little bit of water. A wetter soil is going to accept water, right?
One,
It's going to reduce the adhesive force. Thus, the water is going to move in a lot more efficiently. Next slide.
one thing I kind of wanted to hit on with your explaining is there's two different types of compaction, right? There's the physical compaction when we're running over it with a golf cart or a truck every day or a
Right.
mower, right? A mower.
Yeah.
And then that's physical compression. But then locking up the soil, that is a chemical.
Yeah.
That can be a chemical reaction.
Yeah.
So we're creating cement.
So to that point too, so when I said that, compaction is a condition of soil dysfunction, think about that. It really is. If you've got soccer games going on all clay fields, then you probably shouldn't be playing on all clay fields. You should be able to go in and modify that root zone that resists compactions, right?
Mhm.
That way you're not having to deal with the excess water and making it wetter because you got to grow the grass. And by putting more water on, all you're doing is creating more compaction.
Right.
So that's where soil tests come in. Soil tests not only show you the problems that are in your soil, but also your soil's full potential, right?
And there's three elements to that. I mean, there's that, as your example says, playability, right? How often is that field available to be
Yes.
played on, right?
Exactly.
And safety, right? And well, usability, playability, usability, and safety in the end.
Yeah.
So, okay.
So
Just
as
wanted
long as
to-
we're talking about soil, let's talk about one of the other more important things is about organic matter improvement. So basically understanding how organic matter improves soil structure by enhancing moisture holding capacity is really important. It helps mitigate compacted related issues and establishes a more favorable root zone. So basically a biological healthy soil will hold 4 times the amount of water that one that isn't. By increasing your organic matter soil percent by 1%, you are increasing your water holding capacity by 20,000 gallons to the acre. So think about that. If you can, just by increasing your organic matter content by 1%, you're getting that much more water holding capacity. If you're going to be living in Denver this summer and they are telling you that you only have 2 watering days and that you're going to have to cut back your water use by 10%, you're going to gain that significantly just by improving your organic matter, right? So, Pat, how do you increase your organic matter?
Well, you can do it physically, mechanically, right? We could do things like aerification or, solid tine aerification where we're actually applying a mulch or an organic material and push it in. We can apply it through organic fertilizers. What else can we do?
Anything carbon. Anything that you add to the soil that is carbon based is going to give you the energy. Now, and that's the word, it's energy required to start building organic matter, creating diversity, biodiversity, and start improving your water holding capacity and also your nutrient holding capacity.
Gotcha.
In that biological healthy, so our soils are alive, right? The microbes in our soil do all the heavy lifting. They convert nutrients to usable forms. They bind soil together because of their stickiness that they create in the soil. So by utilizing anything carbon that we're adding into our soil, we're improving organic matter. Now, like I said, the key is energy. You don't want to put a negative energy product into the soil. You want to be adding energy into the soil, not taking energy away. And what I mean by that is balancing carbon to nitrogen ratio products to where the wider the gap in between carbon and nitrogen, the less energy you're providing and you're taking energy away. Whereas a more stable humus-like product is already broken down enough to where the energy used is the energy gained. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. And it's plant available so that it can be used and continue the cycle in continuing to create better soils.
Absolutely. Next slide. So now we're going to transition into soil optimization where wetting agents can play a major role in correcting uneven water movement and supporting consistent soil moisture. Next slide. Wetting agents. So you'll see in the top left corner, that is the natural ability of water. And that's it. Cohesion and adhesion. Cohesion is when water molecules bind tightly together, and adhesion is when water is trying to get into the soil, right? So those are the two fundamentals of what water does in the soil. So when we start getting into areas where drought or hydrophobic soils or anything like that, wetting agents are also known as soil surfactants, and they play a pivotal role in correcting water distribution challenges that occur in landscape settings. Okay? These products function by reducing the surface tension created by the adhesion and enabling water, irrigation water, to spread more uniformly through the soil profile rather than beating on the surface or then either going by the root zone. So there's really two kinds of wetting agents that we talk about, and there's a lot of companies out there that promote or manufacture. You have the penetrating type of wetting agents that help move water down into Bob. And then you have retainer type wetting agents that hold the water inside a Bob that increase the plant available water. So if you could imagine, Pat, you did a soil test, you got your soil texture back, you got you got a sandy soil, you're probably going to use what type of wetting agent?
Something for retention because
Exactly.
sand
Yeah.
moves water.
Yeah. So you're going to gain by using a retainer in a sandy situation, you are going to gain that much water back that normally would go past the root zone and into Never Never Land.
Well,
If
we
if
recharge the aquifer.
well, yeah, you could do that, but it's going to take a long time. The penetrating type is when you use on tighter soils like clay, to where you need to get the water into the soil rapidly so that it doesn't run off because the adhesion is greater on a clay soil than it is on a sandy soil. So why, I mentioned earlier why it would be a great idea in your everyday life, why you should use wetting agents. A couple of those opportunities are, do we ever do anything that is soil directed to fix things in our soil? If anybody out there does pre-emergent herbicides in the spring, you should be using a wetting agent, especially the time of year that we do it. We're coming out of a dry winter. We have gotten no moisture. We're turning our sprinkler systems back on. We are now putting pre-emergent out because our soils are so hydrophobic because we haven't got any moisture. Where is the pre-emergent going to go? It's going to go off target. It's going to go in the gutter. And then all of a sudden now your customer is going to call you in 3 weeks saying dandelions galore, and I just paid for a pre-emergent app.
And it's because all the chemical is sitting up on top, right?
Exactly. It didn't
Yeah,
go to the target in the soil.
Right. So we want to use a penetrant type wetting agent to get that chemical in.
Exactly. If you get grub worms in the summertime, you got to get and again, in the heat of the summertime, that's when these guys show up, or at least the damage shows up, right? What happens? You get your grub material out, you put it over the top, and then you water it in, and then all of a sudden, because your soils are hydrophobic, where does the chemical go that you're trying to kill the grubs?
Well, it's staying right up here when we need it down here where the grubs live, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, if you're using an active ingredient off target and it doesn't work, then that, the most costly spray app or herbicide or insecticide that you use is the one that doesn't work.
Right.
So if you can increase the efficiency of the delivery system, which is the water, then you're going to increase the efficacy of the active that you are using. Next slide. So this is where we start talking about, we've taken many calls here at our branch in Colorado about, hey, we're going to be in a drought. Why should we water, or why should we fertilize our plant material anyway? And here's why. Anybody out there listening in today, for any of you that compete in anything, that run races or do activities that require a lot of energy, we athletes focus on energy loading prior to the stress or prior to the exercise. Potassium, in conjunction to just good nutrition to your programs prior to stress, will help your plant material adapt for the upcoming stresses like water use reductions and or combating sodium issues from poor water irrigation quality. A properly timed nutrition directly impacts the plant's ability to use water efficiency, growing stronger roots and balancing a fertility, which allows plants more available moisture instead of relying on excessive irrigation, especially during the summertime, which is most often found counterproductive. Next slide. So the nutrition that we talk about is the same nutrition that we talk about when you're going to go do a Spartan race in the summertime, or you're going to go run the Los Angeles Marathon or something like that. You are going to preload prior to the stress. We focus a lot on potassium because potassium has a significant role in how it regulates water in the plant. It regulates the stomate. It helps increase rooting. It helps increase the stability of internal pressure inside the plant. It's no different than us eating fats prior to an event. So when you think of nutrition or plant nutrition, we're taught to learn about NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. In reality, what we're feeding our plants are proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. The same thing that we eat, and for the same reasons that we eat them. So you can't forget about nitrogen. Nitrogen is how you grow. Nitrogen is how you grow roots. But the key is you don't do it during the heat of the summer, you do it prior to the stresses. Another thing to think about too is the micronutrients, because they play a significant role in all the metabolic functions that enable photosynthesis, which again, photosynthesis is extremely important because it provides energy not only to the plants, but also to the soil microbes that are in the soil supporting them. Next slide. So everything that I have talked about so far is how do we improve SpongeBob, right? Everything that we can do to improve SpongeBob is going to do everything to improve your maximizing your water use efficiency. Pat is going to go into the next step of telling you how to maximize the efficiency of the delivery system. The sponge that I just talked about is the receiving system. So it tells you right here, understand your soil sites. You got to understand what you got in order to know how to work with them. Texture matters. Soil structure creates larger pores, right? Organic matter improves soil structure. Aerification equals oxygen. An organic soil holds 4 times as much water as one that isn't. Always adequate soil fertility. Use amendments when you have to. Healthy plants have more root mass. Mow higher and understand your water source. Next slide.
Hey, thank you, Nick. Really, I mean, even and I'm going to emphasize, just like you said, about efficient irrigation methods, right? But even with great soil, I mean, you're going, well, if I have great soil and I have healthy plants, why do I have to worry about that? Well, there's a couple of good reasons, right? So, but efficient delivery ensures that the applied water is uniform and predictable. There are two primary elements of commercial irrigation systems, right? That we, how we direct the application of water. The electrical side, right? That's the controller side. And that can be an AC or a battery DC controller, okay? And then the hydraulic side. We're going to talk about both, right? Because they both go together, along with then irrigation to the soil. Next slide. All right, so for a moment, I just want to talk about standard irrigation systems. Standard, right? That means we went to perhaps a big box store or hopefully one of our places. We appreciate it. But you put a controller on the wall and all it does, and all controllers do this, right? They're going to say what day we want to water, what time we want to water it, and how long we're going to run it. So it's a fixed schedule. Quite often, when I first came into the industry, it was 6 days a week, 15 minutes for sprays, 45 minutes for rotors, drip, maybe an hour, right? And we're going to do it 6 days a week with a mow day. And we watered on Tuesday because it was a Tuesday. Yeah, because it was a Tuesday, right? And then regardless, no, it's Tuesday, we water. So they focus on fixed schedules, right? Another thing we're going to talk about, pressure variability within a zone being one valve, okay? And it's got spray heads, or it's got rotors, or it's drip or bubblers. But pressure variance, it leads to an uneven application. I think that one sticks in the mind pretty well. But then when we see the results of it, right, we're going to talk about how we respond, right? So, and then maybe no automated ability to respond to weather conditions. I mean, we recently, a couple of weeks ago in Phoenix, where I reside, it was 106. And then it dropped down to 78. And now it's back at about 90, 95. All of those conditions, that temperature variation, the amount of wind, everything else, it impacts our application rate, or our application of water, right? We definitely need to pour it on at 106, but do we have to do it at 78? Right? And did we go do it? When you're managing 300 controllers and you have to go visit every one of them, that's a tall order. That's a tall order. All right. So, okay, next slide. I had to review, Nick. A lot of points to cover. All right. So those were standard irrigation controllers, right? I want to emphasize on smart irrigation controllers. Well, what makes them smart? It allows the controller to take in weather or sensor-based scheduling, all right, and formulate on it. I don't know if your upbringing was like mine, but I super enjoyed sixth grade. Why? Because they handed me the calculator and let me use it. Okay. Instead of having to do math all the way through, now I could actually work with a device that will help me. Smart irrigation controllers can absolutely help you. All right. Common features for them is on or off-site weather sources. All right. You can have flow sensing. And I don't know if you've ever heard this, but if you're going to put in a flow sensor, there's really, really no good reason not to also put in a master valve. We'll discuss that a little further. All right. And then soil moisture sensing, up and coming. It is integral in many of the products and systems that we offer at Horizon. And then I think the big sexy, if you will, if there is a big sexy in irrigation controls, is remote access and alerting. Remote access can reduce the truck rolls, right? We don't have to necessarily go to the site. We're connected and we're managing from where Nick is sitting or where I'm sitting right now. Okay. We can manage and access those controllers. Also, if you have, your phone, you can have yourself texted before Mrs. Jones calls up the property manager for HOA XYZ because something's not right. Okay. So we can have that alerting and be able to take that in and then schedule and respond to those problems. Okay. Next slide.
Pat,
Yeah.
that isn't just water, having a smart controller and having the remote access, that just doesn't give you water efficient strategies. That more so that gives you time efficient landscape strategies.
Absolutely.
You can do that, like you said, at your desk, in the car, or whatever. You're not driving and adjusting everything. There are more important things to do. And if you can't see that, then you need to open your eyes.
Well, exactly right. And one thing that I don't touch in slide today, but is we talked about soil texture, right? Soil texture 99% of the time needs to be known in order to program a smart controller efficiently and effectively. Many of the platforms that we offer are going to ask you a list of questions on a per zone basis that you need to know. So people ask, is a soil test important? Oh, yeah, it truly, truly is. It doesn't cost much. And in the best time to do a soil test is any time, right? But especially with think about being a landscape maintenance contractor. You just took over a property. How impressive will it be to the property manager you're working with when you do two things? I asked for a couple of bucks. Maybe it's 50, maybe it's 100, depends on how many samples you send in, right? And I took soil samples and I sent them in for a soil test. Hey, and then double down on that and do a water quality test while you're at it. So then you have a completely developed vision of the landscape you're dealing with. It might look fabulous on the surface, and it might be wasting that EPA 50% of the water to get there. Okay. So a smart controller and smart controller integration, very wise. You need to become, and I encourage you, we have many, many different resources at Horizon to be able to become familiar with, and vendor support that we have to be able to train everyone on the ability to interact with those smart controllers, be able to set up remote access, be able to set up alerting. Okay. So that's the electrical side. We've covered that controller side for now. I want to talk now about the hydraulic side. And if you've noticed so far, I've been really agnostic about the brands we offer. We'll cover that in a little bit. But I want to point out there's a specific reason why those two pictures are on your screen right now. Okay. Look for what it says. See, on the top picture, it says check valve and PRS 30. Okay. And then on the bottom, it does have, on the bottom picture, it says PRS and SAM. Well, SAM is a trademark of the Rainbird Company, and it stands for Seal-O-Matic, which also means check valve. Okay. We'll talk about check valves in a minute. But pressure regulating components, all right, they increase. Using them, they increase the evenness, if you will, of the application. There's big terms, distribution uniformity, blah, 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 blah. What we're talking about is evenness of application. All right. By providing that same pressure across the zone, you're allowing the entire zone to be more even and efficient, which may reduce runtimes. Most likely it will, because now you're applying it evenly. And like that slide that Nick had at the very beginning, we can't grow concrete. We want to keep it focused onto our landscape and to the plants we're trying to grow. All right. And then just one last thing, especially in windy zones, and wind can happen anytime, anywhere. But reduced nozzle pressure increases droplet size, and droplet size increases weight of the actual droplet, which means it's most likely going to land on your target, right? Onto the turf. And, in a sports field application where it's wide open, that can be very, very important, right? We don't get paid for taking care of Mrs. Jones' house with Mr. Johnson's water. Yeah. That's not how it happens, right? Next slide. All right. Back to a little bit more on smart irrigation controllers, right? I want to guide you on key features to look for, all right? And these are water conserving features. Interval adjustment. Well, what the heck's interval adjustment? All right. We're not watering on Tuesday because it's Tuesday. Also, we need controllers smart enough where we do live with municipal restrictions, like Nick said, where we're only able to water 2 days a week. How are we going to do that and get enough water into that soil to support the landscape and allow it to grow, at least survive, if not look better or even flourish, right? Because we need to set ourselves apart. Commercial landscapers are in constant competition with each other to who looks better, because these are the ultimate judges. But we together are compensated to know even more than what our eyes are telling us, right? So back to interval adjustment. What that means is that a smart controller is smart enough to know what it did yesterday, right? How much it may or may not have applied. Maybe it didn't water yesterday, okay? Maybe it didn't. It also, in many of our platforms, can look ahead. It can look ahead 2, 3, 4 days on what we might be experiencing, right, in our weather conditions. All right. Weather conditions. They impact, we know it. It's outdoors. They apply to everything we do in irrigation and in landscape care. But interval adjustment, what it does, it remembers yesterday. It goes, hey, did we lose or use enough water yesterday to reapply today? If the answer is no, it will pause and go to the next day. On commercial properties or HOA properties, think about it for a moment. If every time you run the sprinklers, it costs you $500 worth of water, which is very easy to do in Metro Phoenix, especially with the advent of price increases that we have had across the entire metro area. Maybe I shouldn't mention names, but Town of Gilbert, you're a winner. 25% increase in potable water. Okay. That's surprising. What's even more surprising? A 16% increase in non-potable water. Non-potable water. This is water that has been reclaimed from use previously. And yet they have infrastructure needs, and so thus the raise, right? And other municipalities in the Phoenix Metro, and I'm sure across the country, are feeling the same thing and doing the same thing because of it. All right. So if we could save, my point, we go back to that HOA, that commercial property, and we save $500 every time we don't water, how often can we take that interval and still have an acceptable looking landscape because we have enhanced the soil? Or we could save the money on water and to take the water savings, the money savings, and put it back into the soil, perpetuating the cycle. Okay. That's interval adjustment. Cycle and soak. Cycle and soak has become not a premium feature. It's actually become a rather basic feature of many, many controllers. And this is where, especially in banks and sunny facing banks of turf, it will cycle, turn on for like, let's say 9 minutes, right? And it's rotors. And we need to apply 45 minutes of water. Well, you just said I can only apply 9 before it starts running off into the gutter where it's wasted. We're not growing concrete. Right? But we need 45 minutes. So the controller is smart enough to do the calculations, because what we do is we put in a soak time, a pause time, right? And that can be anywhere from 10 minutes to an hour. It depends on the actual system. But controllers are very flexible in being able to provide that. So cycle and soak, right? We need to run how many cycles? 5 to get to 45 minutes. If I go 5 times 9 equals 45. We got first grade math down. Fabulous. All right. But we get that because the controller is smart enough. Now, will it just stay on that? Will it just stay on that station or that zone and just wait for those half an hour, 45 minutes? No, it advances on. It continues around the rest of the site, allowing that pause time to happen, and then reapplies with cycle. Make sense? All right. Last is weather and soil sensor inputs. And I grew up in the 80s. This is not a political statement at all. But what I love about having a weather sensor and a soil sensor is just like President Reagan said to all of us about the Russians, about the USSR: trust, but verify. We take our weather inputs and we allow them to schedule and schedule and schedule, and that's great. But are they doing the right thing? Are we getting the water to penetrate to 6 inches, to 8 inches, to really benefit in growing those roots out? Because I'll tell you this, roots will not cross dry ground to get to wet soil. They're not that smart. They just aren't. We are, and we can help those roots do that. Right, Nick? All right, next slide. All right, so this is my shameless NASCAR slide. But these are the manufacturers and the vendors that partner with us to provide you great products. Okay. They go from AC control systems, battery operated control systems. Okay. And then everything soup to nuts hydraulically. They provide us, and we appreciate their support and their partnership with us. They're fabulous resources. If you're not familiar with some of these names, I encourage you, please check out their websites. Also, check out our own website on horizononline.com, because we have multiple resources that we can help help you become more water efficient. Okay, next slide. Back at you, Nick.
Wow, man, that was good stuff. So, hey, how do you find out if a smart irrigation system is dumb? What's the first thing you do?
Okay, so, well, to find out that it's dumb,
Yeah,
usually I find that the rain switch is disconnected or in up. I'm just telling you. And I'm in Arizona. I'm not going to tell you that there's 100 rain switches, but do you realize they're mandated in the entire state of Texas?
yeah.
So they get installed and then all of a sudden they're not trusted. And so they're removed. They're just disconnected. They're still up on the parapet.
Well, if you have multiple different nozzles in a zone, like you were talking, is that a
Mm.
dumb irrigation system?
Oh, it absolutely is hydraulically. And that's why I wanted to show those pictures, right?
Yeah,
So that you can identify when you're going and walking your site, you need to do an inventory, must do an inventory by zone to know exactly what you're dealing with. But you can also just turn it on and you'll see misting and fogging in some, and those pressure regulated ones you will not. So it's pretty, of course, are you wasting water by doing an ops check? Well, okay, debatable, right? But it's necessary in order
yeah,
to perform maintenance activities. So
right,
make the most of it, though. Make the
right.
most of it. And being able to visually identify what those components are, those caps and whatnot. I mean, it is so very helpful. And product knowledge is important. And it's what we provide.
Good stuff. So, integrated strategy best practices. This section really just ties all the components together: soil, plant health, irrigation hardware, and automation into a single integrated strategy rather than treating them as isolated fixes. Next slide.
Yeah. Maximum water efficiency happens when the soil is optimized first, right? As best we can, and plants are healthy and resilient, and then irrigation is accurate and automation fine tunes that system over time, right? As we become better in utilizing technology, the better off the landscape is going to be, period.
Exactly. And doing things like integrating wetting agents and optimizing your plant nutrition and managing and maintaining, or understanding your water quality management allows you managers to achieve greater water efficiency when implementing these strategies. Wetting agents are designed to enhance performance, right? They're designed to move water evenly through the soil surface. If your water is tied to delivering pesticides, then that's something that you want to do. You want to become as efficient with your water as the delivery system is to getting the pesticides that you're using to where they're supposed to be. At the same time, proper nutrition encourages a deeper root system, right? Grass is lazy. If you're going to put water at the surface, the roots don't have any reason to go any deeper than that. So if we're going to figure out our soil texture, figure out how we can water deeper to get water into the soil, reducing evaporation, increasing transpiration, we're getting way better water use efficiency. Next slide.
So whether you're adding like pressure regulation, like we had shown earlier, or remote access smart controllers, right? Or sensor inputs, savings over time can be realized. But realize all of this automated adjustments, it can be intimidating. It can be. Gathering all of this information to put into a smart irrigation system can be time consuming. It can be. You especially want to do it in the off season so that we're prepared for right now as we're getting into season, right? But it can lead to substantial water and corresponding water bills. You can actually experience a return on investment when you up the technology, both electrically, controller wise, and hydraulically. And they can be done separately, they can be done in phase. So you could start with one, move on to the other. But once you start with one, I encourage you to go all the way through.
Practices. On the side that we talked about already is just doing soil and water testing, right? Pat talked about, identify and verify soil testing, and backing it up with irrigation water testing verifies if you're having problems and if your water is creating those problems. Another thing is auditing your irrigation system. That is significant. It'll give you exact idea of how good your irrigation system is and what tweaks you need to do to make it smart again. These are the things that you are going to create within your organizations to where you're going to create ownership on those properties. And when an owner, your customer, sees that you have ownership, then they are going to understand that they hired the right guys.
Yeah.
If
creates
there's
trust.
anything, what's that?
It creates trust.
It absolutely does. If there's anything that you guys took out of this talk between Pat and I today, was everything that we talked about creates opportunity.
It does.
We challenge you to do something different to bring you those opportunities. Use science as a foundation, right? Science is direct. It'll help you in every avenue of your business. Create expectations and then live up to those expectations. If you do all of that, you will never be fired from your customer.
Yeah, I mean, knowledge is power, right? I mean, we learned that on Saturday mornings during the 1980s.
Absolutely. Exactly.
Right.
Conjunction junction, baby.
Yeah. Auditing, and just a point on auditing systems. It can be, there's a lot of data collection, and it can be fabulous. In fact, I would encourage people learn how to do an audit. I am a certified landscape irrigation auditor. I know the process. I know the math. I can help with that. Okay. Both of us could. But we have many at Horizon that can as well, right? And if you seek to desire, I can't say enough about education, especially what's given to us by the Irrigation Association or your local chapter, such as like ALCA, Arizona Landscape Contractors Association. Some of those education platforms. Also the Arizona Irrigation Association, which is brand new, started in September. I would encourage you to explore these because you can, if you can learn very quickly how to be able to apply this strategy, right? If you're not quite familiar, or you're not experienced, or you don't have people on your staff who are, right? And they can help move you into this next level.
It seems like we have a couple minutes left for questions. So let's start with this one from Sergio, guys. He says, would you also touch on the hydraulic capabilities of the existing pipes on the field to be able to do cycle and soak with multiple running stations?
Well, of course. All right. That's a great question. When you have the capacity, because whether or not you're going to be running those valves regardless, right? For a certain amount of time. Now, in a flat surface, cycle and soak is only really going to be applicable when you have a soil type like heavy clay, because you're not getting penetration. So it might not be necessarily the irrigation system that isn't, applying properly. You might have to look at a different strategy, but such as a wetting agent, a penetrating wetting agent. But to answer your question, 50 gallons per minute through a 2-inch line, 110 gallons a minute through a 3-inch line, 190 gallons a minute through a 4-inch line. Those are all stats. They can be looked up. They're supported. And that keeps you at a 5 foot per second of velocity through that PVC pipe. How many valves are you trying to run at the same time? And if you're using cycle and soak, right, you can run multiple valves, cycle them, and then pause, move on to two more valves. I don't know that that covers necessarily the question, but it does give you the basis for the decision making. Okay, because we're not interacting specifically.
Okay. And then Rick here wants to know your guys' thoughts on bioaeration to break down clay soils.
Ooh.
Bioaeration. So that tells me that you're looking at the soil microbes to do all the work, right? So bioaeration does. Um, that's a great question. When you're dealing with a lot of clay soils, it's going to take a lot of bioaeration to get there. And particularly the reason why the thing that's going to help you get there is you got to have an organic matter percentage to once you get the bio into the soil, it's got to be able to live. So, yes, work with your organic matter content. Remember, putting the right energy in, not taking energy away. And then, yes, by adding biology to the soil, you will create a healthier root zone in those heavy, tight soils.
So, Nick, what you're saying is, so we need to create that organic material or get that in there to be able to support the biological method and means,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
To be able to aerate, and that's interesting. I mean, worms aerate soil, right? And they do it naturally. And if we
Part
can
of the food
support,
chain.
yeah,
Bacteria does too.
right,
You know?
exactly. And if
Yeah.
they can live there, if we can create an environment where they want to live and thrive, then we are going to help the soil completely.
Then you got to manage it. And that's a different story. But yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, very much so.
And we have a question here from Eric. He says filtration is often overlooked, but is critical to making the entire system perform properly. What do you guys think about that?
No,
I
absolutely.
I
Yeah.
I have gotten numerous photos from all over the United States to where we're dealing with mussels in bodies of water that are the direct source for irrigation systems that are now caving in valves and screens on at the head to where nothing is working. So filtration, especially when you're dealing with suspended solids, is an absolute must.
Right. And then the biologic, as you said, right, with snails and mussels and everything else that, hey, they're thirsty too. Don't
Yeah.
take my water away from me, but I'm going to stay right here in this filter.
Yeah.
So one of the key things too is I like, especially on a zone by zone basis, where some filters will have a pop to where it'll have a gauge about, hey, you need to get inside this thing and service it, right, and clean the filter out. Filtration is huge. It can be, across an entire site, where hundreds of valves are dependent on a single pump station. We need to make sure that that's maintained, the pump station as well as the filtration system. I obviously recommend anything that is self-cleaning because we're humans. And you know what? I like drinking beer on July 4th. I don't necessarily like going out and cleaning a filter, but that's probably the exact day you need to do it. Why? Because it's July 4th
Yeah.
and it's the middle of the damn growing season.
Okay, I will leave you guys with one last quick question.
All right.
If I were to start looking at adding irrigation audits to my business, how do
Yeah.
I go about getting started?
Well, you can start at Horizon Online. We do have a document that takes you through it. It's an auditing document, um, and it will give you the ideas. Okay, this is what needs to be accomplished. But again, I'll go back to the IA and I'll go back to like ALCA and the program here locally and the AIA. There are resources that are close to free of charge, close, not all, but to where you can actually learn the steps of auditing, as they're accomplished. And then there is math involved. So we need to brush up on our math and know how to apply formulas. But that is where I would get started to prepare yourself. Auditing is extremely important and it is in demand But how do we create more demand? Well, we look for those high water bills. I can tell you right now that about July, property managers across Arizona are not going to be happy because they did not budget enough water for a 25% price increase. They
Right.
just didn't. That just came out in April. So
Well, thank you, Pat. Thank you, Nick, for your time today. This was a great, informative webinar. Everybody who registered, keep an eye out. We'll have a link to you soon.
Awesome.
thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Pat,
everybody.
see you later.